Go Loud presents the Talking Bollox Podcast.
What you waiting for? Put your back in it. Just a little more. Throw your weight in it now. Tell your body you're dead. Walk it hard and long. When you finish that,
The hip knocker.
go down, go down, go down. Come up.
What's up? It's me, COB.
And it's me, Terry Flower from the Talking Bollox Podcast. What scared you at Michael Myers, Calvin?
Freddy Krueger, Jason.
No, mate. Being Hardy this Halloween.
Luckily, the boys on Manscaped have you sorted out. You have the Performance 4.0 package.
I was in the shower one day, doing the Nixer in the old town halls, trying to get them as smooth as anything. Blood all over the gaff. Cut myself. Poxy thing. Should have used Manscaped. And the worst part is, the next day, my brother was using the thing in his face. Oh, boys, I'm at the complete on. I'm sweating.
So just as well, Manscaped is here to save the day and make sure that you're feeling your best in your costume this spooky season.
Don't forget the Crop Preserver Ball deodorant, the Crop Reviver Ball Toner. They'll keep your pumpkins fresh.
Make sure you unlock your confidence with the Performance Package 4.0. Inside you get the holy grail of men's grooming items like the Lawnmower 4.0 and the Weed Whacker. They'll also throw in the Body Buffer, Manscaped Boxers and the Travel Bag.
Join the 6 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by going to manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with the code GOLOUD20.
They'll have you going out this Halloween season as smooth as a snooker ball. Get rid of that George Bush. Make the right call this spooky season. It's trick or trim.
Boom! Boom! Episode 95 of the Talking Bollocks Podcast, brought to you by Go Loud. It's me, Terry Flower.
It's me, COB.
And this week we're joined by Go Left to Right boys, yeah?
The Two Norries Podcast. It's Timmy Long and
James Leonard.
What's happening, boys? How's things?
Thanks for the invitation. Nice little gaff you got here.
Yeah.
Some little setup, isn't it, that we have?
yeah.
Well, robbing a living. Aren't we, James? We came to the kitchen table straight into this, all the lights and cameras and all, like, there'll be wax white sitting here, there'll be.
No, but you know it's great to have the tech support because you're focused then on the content and facilitating the conversation. You're not worrying about, you know, did somebody press record? Is the sound good on that? You know, but that's where we started out, like, isn't it?
Big time, yeah. And you were only saying you've had a tech issue there recently.
Yeah.
A
We
bad
say no more.
A bad one is, yeah. But these things happen. It's all the learning
let's
curve.
just say it's resolved.
Yeah. They got to sort it out, but fucking hell, yeah. Like I was saying, it's a learning curve, isn't it, at the start, boys? And when you're doing these things by yourself, like, I remember when we was doing it in the kitchen, like, it's a nuisance. You're saying, if we say this, we didn't even really know how to cut or anything. So we do a whole podcast and I'd be
In
like,
one take.
yeah.
In one whole take, start to finish, pause. Or press play and then pause when you're finished. And
That's all we do to this day. We start and we finish and we cut the top and the tail of the pot, but the whole thing goes out as it's recorded. But you know what was important for us? Do you know when we were starting out the podcast, Blind Boy put out a podcast on the philosophy of podcasting, which was brilliantly timed because I was up in my head about I need this equipment and I need this software and Adobe Creative Cloud and Zoom H8 recorders, mics and cameras and all. And Blind Boy put out a podcast and he says, the most important thing is the content,
100%.
not the tech. And people don't care about what latest tech you have. If the content is good, that's what the people want. So focus on the content and the rest will look after itself over time. And I thought that was good advice then, you know.
100%, and it's a prime example of us. If you listen back to our first few episodes, oh my God. Like, when I listen back to it now, I go, how do people listen?
I know.
But it's how we started off. Like, we started off with Calvin's phone. We just put it on the kitchen table and we were like, right, start. And then we took
Echo in the background, you can hear sirens going
Dogs,
by,
yeah.
fucking
Everything.
pigeons outside and all, what have you.
But the content was good.
It must have been, because
Yeah.
there are fucking people that come back.
And now, you could get like a €250 basic 720p camera, right, from Argos. You could get a $5,000 4K camera. The people watching don't give a shit, and they probably won't even notice. It's just when you're in this zone, you know these little differences. But the general population just want good content.
Yeah.
You know.
Something that they can relate to, or maybe something that's going on for them in their own lives as well, and they might need some guidance around, you know. So that's what most people want, is to hear people's stories around how they got over this or got over that or what's going on in their lives. And sometimes this might just be a bit of crack.
Yeah.
Like we're having here today, you know.
Exactly, yeah.
That's why we're grateful for the lads here. You know, once we leave here, that's it. We know the podcast is going out. They'll spruce her up or do whatever they have to do, try. You know what I mean? And as well, what we couldn't do when we were in the kitchen table, we couldn't take a toilet break. So
Yeah.
we've been lads gone with the toilet now. Boom.
Yeah, you were very confident with your toilet breaks a while ago.
We may as well tell everybody where
Yeah.
we were, lads, and how we ended up getting us up here and what has you up in Dublin. So we were out giving a talk for the Irish. Do you want to fill this
We
in?
were out giving a talk for the Irish Probation Services. It was just around how mental health podcasts help people in their daily lives, basically, and how it influences them, and the importance of mental health podcasts, particularly mental health podcasts that break the language down, like ours, like yours, like Blind Boys. We're breaking the language down for the people that need it the most, and that's people who are coming from areas of drug addiction, poverty, where they may not be educated, but the language we speak in then is their language. We're not using academic language. We're using language that everybody can understand because it's toned down, isn't it, James?
Yeah, and in the event earlier on, it was put on by the Irish Probation Service, and there was a panel discussion of which there was talking Bollox, the Two Norries, Dr. Sharon Lambert and Senator Lynn Rowan. And because everybody on that panel has done some sort of a podcast on criminal justice, mental health, addiction, recovery. So that was the context of where we were today, and it went really well today, boys, didn't it?
I was
Yeah.
privileged to be there, lads. Honestly, it was an honour to be there. But the lads are giving me a bit of stick because they asked everybody a question, and before the question came to us, I knew we were next. So I was like, I better run the toilet before they ask. But it was very abrupt in front of everybody. And when I came back, Lynn was talking, and then Terence Grubb went to the toilet.
And I was getting ready to go then.
Yeah, nudged me, didn't he? Goes, I'm fucking borsting.
The Dubs are very weak bladders, apparently.
But it was a good chat. It was a very progressive talk, wasn't it, boys? Like, and like all of us said in there, we're not actually mental health podcasts, but mental health just seems to pop up in every podcast.
Yeah. Do you know what I find one of the biggest things to take away from today is this, that the probation services are actually looking at areas like this as a benefit. You know, there's massive change in the criminal justice system in this country at the moment, whether people know it or not. They're starting to look at people within the prison system and look at them as human beings who may, not just criminals who are there, but human beings who have a past. They're looking more into their past and looking who they are and why they behave in certain ways and why they do certain things, other than just saying, nah, he's the fellow who done that or whatever, like, stay away, you know? That's all changing.
It's exactly what we were saying earlier. Life experience is worth more than anything, boys. And if you want to talk about the criminal justice system, you two boys are a prime example. Like, you have lived that life and you have come through the other side of it. And now look at you, you're very successful in the podcast world and you're doing big things. So who else would you want in that seat to give that talk than people who've lived it, you know what I mean? Instead of somebody who's high up and hasn't lived it, let's just say that, and hasn't lived that, and they're sitting you down telling you how this happens and how that happens. No, let's get people in who've lived that life, and you're out the other side of it. It's not like as if you're still involved in crime or drugs or anything like that. You're out the other side now. So you was a prime example for that, you know, that type of way.
And you know, like yourselves know, we're from an area where there'd be a lot of like social deprivation, poverty and stuff like that. So that's where we're from, in the north side of Cork City. And people from the north side of Cork City are known as Norries. So I heard one he saying a while ago that when he named the podcast, he thought that maybe you might be popular amongst where you lived, you know. But that was a bit like us. We thought that we might be popular, but we keep having to explain to people outside of Cork what a Norrie is, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this thing just grew legs, you know. But do you know why? It's like that people want something like non-traditional media, you know. I'm not going to say mainstream media because that has kind of right-wing connotations, you know. But like, there's a lot of stuff on RT and it would be like cyclical. So you'll have like Nathan Carter will be on singing 2 or 3 times a year, and you know, and that's fine. But there's no representation from our communities. And I think when we started putting ourselves on camera and talking, people like, do you know what, they're speaking, and I don't know anybody else with my accent that speaks like that. And then we, once you have a platform, then you can give other people the opportunity to share their story that they may never get the opportunity to share their story. And people with backgrounds like ours and from areas like ours, they have a lot to offer. But and what we can do with podcasts, because it's an independent medium, and you know, anybody can start one up, and that's the beauty of it. Just start one up, get your friend on, and if they have a story to tell, let them tell it, you know. So it's just great to be able to represent your area, you know.
And you know what's very important as well? That we need more of these podcasts. because we need more of the spoken word of the people that are on the ground. You know, the working class people that are caught up in addiction and recovery, and in recovery. We need more people voicing. You know, more people listening. You know, and what's going to happen then from that is we'll start breaking stigmas.
Yeah.
People will be kinder to each other because they now understand that those that are maybe homeless or those that are begging on the street, you know, they're human beings at the end of the day, you know. And it's not that they made a choice to go on the streets or anything. Sometimes your situations, like, you've no control over them, you know. Like, I know I didn't have the awareness to get away from the life that I lived before until something really major happened in my life, and it pushed me into that direction where I was losing everything, losing my children, my wife. I had nowhere to go, you know. I had to start somewhere, so I went to a doctor to get help. You know, it's more stories like that we need to hear, because that's how we're going to change people's perception of people from areas of poverty and drug addiction and crime. And that's where we need to lean to.
Definitely, Timmy, and we say all the time, if our areas are nurtured correctly, like, you'll see some serious talent showing through in all aspects. It's not just in sport where funding is completely underfunded as well, but it's like in podcasting and everything. Like, we've stories to tell.
Arts, like, we've some big actors as well. Like, we were having a chat about Barry Keoghan outside, and he was talking about a film that he was in, and I was saying, like, I know him, like, he grew up where I grew up, and he's coming from an underfunded area, you know what I mean?
Look at where you're from, okay, lads, both of you, and James, both of us too. Look at where we're from, right? And look at the talented young footballers that came through the area, right? I mean talented. And they never made it because drink and drugs.
100%.
And me and James know a handful of, a dozen of them there, straight off the top of my head here. You know, they need role models like us.
Even outside of the drinking drugs, there might be a single mother there, right? There might be 3 or 4 kids. She mightn't have the time to bring him to train and to go to the matches. It's very easy then for him to get lost when the motivation goes down.
Boys.
And we all know people from your local area that had huge potential, but they ended up in addiction or mental health or long-term unemployed because the mother, for whatever reason, or the father, wasn't able to take them along. But Kelly Hampton is from your area, isn't she?
Exactly, and look what she's done, like, in a completely underfunded boxing club. Like, imagine if that was funded correctly, how many more Kelly Harringtons would we have? And it's the same thing of, like, the role models where we're from, boys. Like, growing up, I know when I was growing up, the role models to me were the youngsters that were in the fresh clothes and the nice watches, and they were doing bits here and there. And I used to look at the working man and think, why would I go and break me back every day for 8 to 10 hours when I can stand there and do that? And that's the vision. So people, I don't think, when you're not from the area, I think it's hard to understand how you get caught up there. Like, how do you get caught up and you end up in prison and end up strung out on drugs? And you're like, well, if you're growing up and you're seeing that every day, like we spoke about earlier on, monkey see, monkey do, boys. And when you're looking at these, I always aspired to take the wrong road, because we don't really fully understand as we're growing up the pros and cons to that life. Like, the pros to the working life is you get to go out, earn an honest wage, come back, feed your family, and you don't have to look over your shoulder. But we don't see that when we're younger. We see the lads in the nice clothes and the nice watches and think, handy few quid, you don't have to move off the block, you stay in the flats, and you make money. But
there's a if what you're saying there is true, okay? But so many young fellas like myself, yourselves, slip through the cracks because
100%.
school isn't the place for us, okay? And education, we can, like, a lot of us slip through the cracks because we weren't able to get an education because we'd learning differences or ADHD, and you couldn't sit in the classroom and focus, you know. So what happens then is, if you don't get that assessment, right, by the school, by an educational psychologist, to pick out these things and get you the education and these teachers, so these teachers can understand you as a person and your education level and what your ability is, and you don't get the education, what are you going to do? You're going to go out and you're going to hang around the streets, and that's it. But what if the education system is like this, okay? What if every child, right, if the teachers were we're educated around dyslexia, dyspraxia, all these different learning differences, okay? And they were able to say, right, they had somebody in the school then that they go to, this child needs an assessment from an EP, an educational psychologist, okay? That child then gets the assessment done, okay? The report comes back, the school can meet that child's needs. What happens? That child doesn't slip through the cracks.
No, the child
That
gets
child's
motored
not
then,
left
yeah.
at the back of the classroom. That's where we need to focus, lads.
Exactly, Timmy.
Do you know, that's where it needs to be focused. We need to start in the schools. Now, that child, same child, might have a lot of difficult situations going on at home. Okay, a lot of them, like I did myself.
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't just dyslexic. I had really a lot of stuff going on at home. But you can also introduce something else, like counselling, kind of maybe a counselling service where there's a connection then, because schools play a massive role in children's lives growing up. You know, that's where it developed, you know, and we go on. And I think we need to start there.
But even see, this is now where we're starting when we're talking about doing counselling on platforms like this. Because I think many years ago, like, there would have been a stigma around talking to someone. Like, you think if somebody went to counselling, there's something wrong with them.
Yeah.
Where nowadays we're openly saying counselling's the best thing for you, talking to somebody, doing this type of thing and doing that type of thing. So I think once we're on here and we're trying to spread a good word and like saying that it's okay to go and do these things, well then that's a good start. But I think you're right, the education system needs to be changed, and it's not going to save every kid, and some will slip through the cracks, but like it's a better chance.
That's about teachers as well. Like, teachers need to realise the influence they actually have over somebody. Like, if you show them that bit of encouragement and that bit of belief, and that instills self-confidence, then, like, you know what, I actually could go on and do something here, or if I get the head down, look what I can achieve. But it has a negative impact as well. If you, like, kind of push a child away and are constantly talking down to them and saying, I don't want to say you're stupid, because not every teacher says that, but in a condescending way, teachers do belittle you. You push kids away from the education system, then they're like, I'm not going into school and teachers are going to give out to me all the time, or you make you feel like you're nothing and you won't be able to achieve anything. So teachers need to realise their position in a child's life. As you said, that's where you develop.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
absolutely. But do you know if you're down the back of the class and you're not understanding the content of the class, and the teacher doesn't say you're stupid, but he just leaves you off. He's telling you you're stupid. That's how you're perceiving it as a child, you know.
You're not worth the time, basically.
No, you're not. And then you're like, right, he's not helping me, but he's helping the other people, you know. So that means I'm not worthy and I'm stupid. But that kills your self-esteem. And I would say to teach, and we have a lot of teachers access our podcast because we talk a lot about education and stuff like that. But like, if you're in a class with 15 pupils and there's one or two in the class that are finding it difficult, they're the children that need most your attention. They're not the children that should be on the back, they should be up the front.
Yeah.
Because none of the children that are up the front that are flying academically, they have it. Whatever, they're probably from stable homes, they have a natural flair for it. They don't need so much attention, but the problem is they get all the attention because that's where the teacher gets the reward. Oh, I got my class at 6 A's, you know, I got 8 students got first class honours, but that's not a reflection on you if 9 students got F's or they're struggling, and get out of the mindset of school is about creating workers, where school should be about the psychosocial development, the psychological development, the social development of the child. And if the child becomes academically intelligent as a result of that, fair enough. But the goal here should be to create happy children and that the children find their way. But I want to touch on one thing. You spoke there about you know, your relationship with employment and stuff like that growing up. And what you're talking about there is like masculinity for males in areas like our own. And I was the exact same. I used to look at people going to work and I used to think, there's a gourmet. Now, a gourmet is a word we use. He's like fool, you know?
Yeah.
I said,
Sausage.
A sausage. There's a sausage, you know? And, but like, and the idea of what a man was, or what it was to be manly, was to be like aggressive, violent, to take drugs, to go out with a lot of girls, promiscuity, reckless behaviours, joyriding, antisocial behaviour. But you know, when you do a little bit of personal development, or you get a bit of wisdom with age, you realise, you know what? A real man actually goes to work and looks after his family legitimately. And you think that, like, not going to work and committing crime is an easy life. That's a way harder life.
Yeah.
Because you'll never have no peace of mind. Do you know any high-profile gangster that got out the other end to live a fulfilled life? They don't. But you know what? If you go to college and do your little course or do a legit job, you mightn't have half as much money, but you'll have half as much problems, and you'll be able to grow old and healthy and see your kids grow and be there for all the milestones.
And that's the thing I say to a lot of people, like, you can live in that lifestyle, but you have to look over your shoulder when you're making your money, and you have to look over your shoulder when you're spending your money. and some of them have too much money, they actually can't spend it. So
And
no use
even-
having all that cash.
And even when the money's gone,
yeah,
even when the money's gone, you still have to look over your shoulder
Exactly.
because of the madness of
Definitely.
that life.
you don't realise you have all that cash. You can't spend on a car. You can't buy a house. It's literally just.
Yeah.
It's more of a problem having it.
Do you remember that TV show, The K District? Or
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the first time in my life, and I'm not telling you, like, I never in my life heard of Balenciaga or Canada Goose.
Yeah.
I didn't know these brands. These weren't on my
We're all in
radar.
cultures, James.
But I know, but they raided this young fella's house. He was about 14. His wash bag was worth €800. He puts his aftershave into it, you know. But it's like the image, and I think TikTok and Instagram to a lesser extent, they contribute to it. And the big thing in Cork at the moment, is probably up here too, is drug intimidation. So there's back in the day when we were using, we're in recovery now, but back in the day when we were using, especially when we were teenagers, you might get a block of hash, right? €50 for a half ounce of hash, a bag of cans, go down into the field and get stoned. You do no harm to nobody, right? But these days, young fellas are getting weight. They're getting ounces of weed or coke. They're never going to be able to pay it back. Then they're on TikTok. They think that they're John Gotti.
Yeah.
Right, John Gotti's dead, so that won't get cut. But but they're on TikTok with all this drugs. They're never going to be able to pay it back. And then the mothers and fathers' doors are being smashed in. They're looking for money. The mothers and fathers have to go to the credit union. They have to remortgage the gaff, get loan shark money to pay back the drug dealers. But that's a huge problem in Cork. at the
It's
moment.
not mad. Look, that's now the difference in this generation to our generation. Let's say, so we were looking to the lads, and we were obviously thinking the walking man going out doing that. What the fuck? When we know now that that's the life to live. But nowadays, it's like they're living up to a social media life.
Yeah.
Like if they're not wearing the Canada Goose, the Balenciagas, and this, that, the Alexander McQueen's, well, sure, how are you? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's all just this reputation and this fake lifestyle that they're all
Yeah.
living. And even these holidays and all, they're going over and they're getting loans off the credit union.
Yeah.
And on that Bollox out just to go on a holiday to put pictures on social
You're getting
media.
a Rolex to sit in your local pub, and who are you impressing in your local pub with a Rolex on? Oh, my watch is worth 10 grand. All right, you're still sitting there buying the same amount of points as I am. Like,
I know, your watch is 10 grand, mine is 100. It's 9 o'clock on board of them.
genuinely, you know what I mean? Who are you impressing?
Yeah. But you know what? It's a form of mentality. It's a form of
it
state of being. I would have been that way when I was back in the day, when I was involved in whatever I was. I would have been like that. It was all about the materialistic things that they had, the cars, everything that they had. It was all about that, okay? Because that was my mentality, okay? And I'll tell you where my mentality was back then. My mentality was this: to go to prison with my father, for my son to carry on the family trade, which is drugs, and for him to be in prison with me. Okay, that's where my headspace was back in the day. You know, why? Because I looked at young fellas that were in prison with their father, and I thought, I was like, "Jeez, great, there was old man, and fuck it, you know."
It's a bit of
That's,
pride
that's
type
how it
thing.
was in our area, you know. We looked up to these people, and that was my mentality. But I tell you where my mentality is now here today. Today, it's in a place where, an example, one of our pets died last year. Okay, we had the dog about 10 years. She grew up with my son, who's 11, and 10 years ago, if that pet had died and I see my small lad crying to that dog, I would have probably gave him a clip around the back of the head and said, stop crying. What are you doing? Can't show emotion. You know, you're a man. I'm teaching you how to be a rough, tough man. You know, we didn't. But you know what I done this time when that dog died? I grabbed my son, I hugged him, he cried, and I told him it was okay. I told him it was a process of life, and I left him grieve.
Yeah.
Okay, what I done there was I showed my son how to develop emotionally, and when something happens like that in life, that it's okay to cry. You know, that's how much someone can change in 10 years. From where I was 10 years ago, wanting all this, but in 10 years later, that's how human beings can change their whole lives around. So if there is anybody out there that is caught up in all this stuff, there is a part you can change.
Yeah.
You can change that viewpoint. You know, it was just that that was my normal life. That's how I grew up, around that kind of talk, those people, and that's all I knew. I knew nothing else. All I wanted to do was be a fucking drug dealer, go to prison, have everyone afraid of me, have the best of everything. You know, that was it. And my family were a part of that as well. You know, but listen, the reason I mentioned the change there is because I think it's important as well for a lot of listeners who are maybe at that point in their lives and they're going through that change, like trying to get out of that world, that life. You can change that mentality. You know, life is good. There is a happy ever after that kind of madness as well, but you have to work on it.
That shift in mentality is inspirational. Like, the fact that you can sit here and say, like, this is how I was and this is how I am. Like, that is genuinely inspirational. And you said something earlier on, and we'll get into his stories individually now in a second as well, and how he's got the way as well. But you said something earlier on to me that really gave me, like, a good perception of where you were in life years ago. And you said something about you wanted that respect there and where you were from, and that was the people who you were looking up to. So you say you were getting bullied. These bullies respected these people in prison and stuff like that, and you wanted to be like them. Do you want to fill us in there? And
Well, it's as simple as that. I grew up in a home. My mother, single parent, brought up 3 boys in her own. You know, severe mental health issues within my family and home. Okay, school was not an option for me because I couldn't get an education because there was too much going on at home, and I went through the education system undiagnosed with dyslexia as well. Okay, so school was a really difficult place for me, number one, but home was just as difficult. Then out the street was just as difficult again because we were poor. There was a smell at me. I weed the bed every night of the week because I had so much fear instilled in my body from the stuff that was going on at home. You know, so I'm going out, there's a smell at me. I would have went to school with soccer boots with the studs taken off them as a young child because we couldn't afford it. I would have snuck in during the lunch breaks to go in and get more buns and, you know, the old school lunch that you get just to feed myself because that's how tough it was growing up. You know, going home then, my mother, God bless her, she had a really difficult life, you know. She was really, really, really destroyed in terms of her mental health and she couldn't get out of it. And I was the oldest of 3 boys. And that was my life for a long, long time. Got involved in crime at a young age. Took my first solvents at a young age, maybe 10, 11 years of age. Sniffing gas, petrol, you know, and then escalated. You know, got involved in crime at a young age. You know, these are all things I got involved in because of my circumstances. I was bullied on the street as a young child. And if I dare and go in that door crying, you'll be sorry, you know. You'll be sorry. And I didn't, you know, I had to stay out there and fucking, didn't matter how big they were, I'd take the baiting, you know, and I fight back. And it made me a tough kid, you know, from a really, really young age, like I wanted to take my own life as a young child because of my situations. And I cut completely off at a young age and I went up in stairs. I just completely shut off from every emotion that was in my body. I never felt excitement anymore. Do you know the excitement you feel for Christmas and the school tours? That all stopped at a certain point in my young life. And it was like nothing kind of got me anymore, do you know, because of just I lost all forms of trust for human beings. Love wasn't something that I became a right mad child, you know, fucking, and bullying. I would have stood up to bullies as a young child. And you know, this is very important. When you stand up to a bully and you get the best of a bully, okay? What happens then is that you have to keep that kind of trail up because if you don't, you're vulnerable again. And that was something I had to carry through my whole life. Then that kind of macho, that like image of myself, you know. And I went into my first overdose. It was prescribed meds and a bottle of whiskey. I'd robbed my grandmother's medication. She was minding us in the house. And she was staying, my mother was alive at the time, and she was staying with us. And my mother had a partner at the time, and he was out working. He was a bouncer, I think. And I took her medication over a bag, and I took a bottle of whiskey and I drank it in the drive, and I was found in the driveway of the house when he came in later on. Brought out to the hospital, all the shit they do, they give you the charcoal and all this next day there was a priest there and a psychiatrist, and sure I was out of my head because the night before when I went into the hospital, I was very fucking aggressive and all this shit, you know, and that was it. You know, went into treatment at 15. You know, stayed in one treatment centre for 6-7 months. Came out of there, went into another one after there to France for another 2 years. You know, I had a few charges to come back from France for assaults, for violent assaults while I was drinking. I got a 4-year suspended sentence at the age of 18, you know, for an assault that I'd committed when I was 15 or 16. And I slowly went back into the drug scene then. I had only taken ecstasy and prescribed meds and alcohol before that. Right, about 19 when I still took my first line of cocaine, and that was it then. It was game over. Because that gave me something I'd never ever experienced. The ecstasy gave me love, okay? The prescribed meds gave me, just took everything away.
Numbness, yeah.
But the cocaine gave me confidence. Right?
Take
Gave
on
me
the world.
confidence. It gave me self-esteem to go up and talk to women and, you know, fucking be the boy and all this. And, you know, but I was taking large quantities of steroids as well at the same time. I was off my fucking game, you know.
Testosterone
Yeah.
through the roof, like.
Off, you know, I was 17 stone at about 19 years of age, and
Jesus.
I was, you know, I was completely mad, violent as well, with
Yeah.
drugs and me and stuff, and that went on for a number of years. With 2 kids going on, 2 kids then during that time. My daughter was born in 2007. My wife today was my partner back then, and I, like, whenever I'm talking about my story to anybody, the people I'm telling, like, just say, oh, you're hardly with the same woman, yeah?
I'm at the being thinking the same thing, Jimmy.
You're hardly with the same woman.
Fucking hell.
But the
Some
reality,
life.
she stayed by me. Like, it would be a drinking drug binge for me. And the binge would be a week, 2 weeks, you know. And then, like, I wasn't getting enough off the drinking drugs. Gambling was there, other stuff. Robbing. I go robbing for the buzz of the robbing. Didn't have to rob because I had money for drugs and stuff like that. But I got a buzz out of it. I got a kick out of going, oh, fucking, you know, no consideration for people or their belongings or anything. I just didn't care whether I lived or died, to be honest with you, at the time, you know. That wasn't even a concern for me. That went on for the whole of my 20s, straight through until I hit 31. And I was just on my way to prison at this stage for violent assault and robbery. You know, something that to this day I can honestly put my hand up and say I can't even remember. You know, I woke up in the cell the next morning with a white coat on me with the thing. I thought I was after murdering my other brother because he was with me in the tours. We were after taking a load of tablets, and we were drinking vodka and had no clue until the guards inside the interview room told me later on the day what happened. And it was a relief that I didn't kill somebody, but I felt shitty because of what we were after doing as well, you know. And that happened in 2009. Continued drink. That didn't stop me in the drinking drugs. Kept going for another few years until the 26th December 2011. And I ran out of money on a drinking drug binge, and I done another robbery. And I got caught for it. And I had a big scuffle with the guards, brought to the station anyway. I was covered in pepper spray. I was completely naked in the cell. But I was after planking a bag on me, drugs on me before I went to the cells. And the only thing that was going through my head from the moment they arrested me to the moment they left the cell was the drugs that were there. And something happened to me that night, and I just had this glimpse of awareness. This information came through, and it just said, what are you doing with your life? This is St. Stephen's Day now, okay? No contact with my children at Christmas, okay? Nowhere to stay. The guards were looking for me. I was after breaking a bail order for another charge. My wife, my partner at the time, had me gone out of the house. And people were just sick to death of me because I was just constantly hurting people, you know. And when I say hurting them, I was hurting them because of the carry on I was then they loved
Emotionally
me.
hurting someone,
They loved me, like, and that I remember crawling around that cell floor, right, trying to pick up white pieces of paint off a grey floor, thinking that there were little cracks of cocaine. And that came to me, and I got up on top of the bed inside in the cell, and I cried and I cried and I cried. I got out the next day, following night, and I got a taxi up to my partner's house. I knocked at the door and I begged her to leave me and to sleep on the couch because I had nowhere else to go. And she paid for the taxi. And the next morning, I went to the doctor. He put me on an antidepressant, and he sent me to a counsellor, and that was the start of my journey. I went to treatment in February, came out of treatment at the end of February. I went to prison at the start of March, and that's when I continued my journey then, through the education, through psychotherapy, drug counsellor, all these different things, personal development, AA, and I just kept going. I had two brothers on the landing with me. I went to the Midlands first on my own. One of my brothers came over from Portlaoise. When I went into prison, the first day I went into prison in March, I went in with one brother. I had two brothers on the landing. There's three of us there, but I have two half-brothers as well from my father. So there was four of us on the landing, four brothers on the one landing. I was there 2 days, and they shipped me up the Midlands. They put Tommy up to Portlaoise. They left John Paul there, and we had another brother, Roy. He's my half-brother as well from my father. And I was in the Midlands doing my thing anyway. Tommy came over for a weekend visit. Family, they do that. And he decided to stay for obvious reasons. He enjoyed it. Let's just say he enjoyed the nightlife.
Yeah.
Right, and we were about 9 months into our sentence, and I got my door opened early one morning, and priest came into me with the chief and the landing, and he told me my mother was after taking her own life in the family home, and I was distraught. You know, I wasn't speaking to my mother at the time because I was dealing with a lot of emotional stuff from my childhood. And it was her birthday the day before. So she died on the 3rd. It was her birthday on the 2nd. You know, and I spoke to her the night before in the office because Tommy, my brother, was speaking to her in the office. And I popped in and I said, hello, how are you? She promised me she was going to go to counselling and all these things. And I thought it was great, you know. And so the next morning she took her own life that night. And I was destroyed. I was riddling guilt because I wasn't speaking to her. We didn't have a relationship, but I was minding myself at the time. And I stayed clean. We had a conversation about clean a while ago, about the word clean, but I stayed away from alcohol and drugs, even though I was going through all this stuff at the time. I managed to get through it because I had some really good people in prison that were helping me, you know, the psychology department. And I continued my journey through the education. I stayed in the Midlands for a few years, then I went on to an open prison, you know, and I was able to get get out in the community return scheme, and I went home to my family, right? I continued with education. I went on to further education and third level education, and I kept up my psychotherapy, you know, but it was tough. It was a tough road, you know. It was a really difficult road, you know, because I wasn't now inside in a prison setting and learning how to live. I was at home with 2 young children and a wife, and I had to learn to be a father, something that was unknown to me because I didn't have a father. I wasn't taught. I'd be inside in the prison and I'd be reading parenting books to see what's the best way to be a father, and asking the lady in the library how am I supposed to behave when I go home to my children, like I've never been there before. You know, and it was all that kind of stuff. And when I went home, things got too much for me, and I had to go back to my doctor and tell him I was completely depressed. Like I lost all the peace that I had because I had responsibilities now, and I had to learn to live on the outside with a family and responsibility, something that I'd never had before. You see, you have to understand this. When somebody's addicted to substances or alcohol or whatever addiction, that addiction is the main thing that's going on in their head 24/7, 365 days a year. Nothing else. Nothing. And that was my life constantly. And now I'm at home and I've all these responsibilities I have to provide, you know, financially. I have to mind them, you know. I have to be there for my wife, you know, who's after just spending the last few years on their own with the children, bringing them up. My son now is going on 4, and I'm in his life for the first time. And he's saying, "Who's this fella like?"
Yeah.
And you're trying to move him from our bed, my wife and my wife's bed, into his own bed, and he's saying, "Knocking in there, I'm in here for the last 4 years."
Yeah.
Do you know, all that kind of stuff. These are all new things, but listen, I just kept going. I just had this belief within me here that my life is there for bigger things. You know, I'm better than what I was doing. I never felt that what I was doing all those years like was who I was as a human being, but it was like I had to do them, because if I left that macho image
The
down,
ego, isn't it?
that vulnerability, that child, that little boy that was really sad and so innocent, would be very vulnerable, and I didn't want that to happen again. But slowly but surely you can drop that armour, you know, and it's an armour here, you know, and you can drop it and you can open up, and it takes time, because I'm still learning, let me tell you. You know, it takes time. But today, listen, I've been through a lot since I got out of prison, an awful lot, you know. And we spoke earlier on about behaviours. Behaviours are a massive thing for people that have been caught up in addiction, in prison, institutionalised, all these different things. It's not about just dropping the drink and the drugs, it's the behaviours. Like, I was a few years home, you know, and I still had issues with anger, and I would have jumped out of the car one day, you know, and road raging and nearly assaulted somebody on a bike because they stuck up their finger at me. You know, that kind of rage. I nearly went back to prison over that, you know, but I learned a lot from it.
It's in the blink of an eye as well.
Like that. My wife was in the car with my children. You know, all I seen was this, okay? This is what I seen. This fella's just after insulting me. Who does he think he is? I'll fix him. Does he know who he's messing with? Do you know? That was my ego, mind, do you know? And I couldn't leave anybody see me not do anything. No, there's no one there. Do you know, I couldn't just be, I'd just allow it to happen and walk away, you know. And I learned from things like that, you know. Today I do learn from things like that, and I try to live an honest life as best as I can. I watch my company, I watch the places I'm going around, I watch what I'm doing, and I'm growing every single day. I'm growing, and we were speaking about role models earlier on in the conference, and I'm a role model for my children today, okay? And I'll just explain why. Today, I'm changing that generational aspect of trauma in my family, mental health, addiction. All my family were all destroyed from addiction, me and my brothers, you know. And that's stopped today. Education, my kids now know it's the next step is there after secondary is college, if that's what they want to go on to, you know. These weren't options for us growing up, you know. That was never there, you know. So that's positive role model today, you know, and that's one of my most important roles in life, is to be that, you know. So that hurt and pain that was continuing through my family for all these different generations, it stops here. Now they'll go through their own stuff as well, God knows, but they'll learn how to deal with issues in life a lot more easy.
And they don't have to inherit yours.
Yeah, exactly. And we have to be very cautious as parents that we don't pass them on as well.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're children, we can teach them as best we can, okay? but we can also have a bit of crack, you know. We can have a bit of a mess here and there, and you can love them, and make sure you tell your child every single day that you love them.
Every day.
Every day, like, and hug them, you know. And what's more, how do you show a child love? Give them time.
Mm.
My child, small fella, says to me there 1 year, about 2 years ago, I was so busy with college and everything else. He says, Dad, all I want is a bit of time. All I want is a bit of time, you know. What did I do? I didn't even go to college that day. I couldn't. I started crying because it's just all he wanted. He wanted nothing else but just a few hours with his daddy, and that's it, you know. And that's my life today. You know, that's my life today. I still deal with a lot of stuff internally, stuff that I still work around on a daily basis. Fear, shame, guilt, all these things that I don't want to be passing on to my children. You know, I still have to deal with them, processing them. You know, I'm still in education today. I went back to education there in the last few weeks. I'm very passionate about meditation, mindfulness, and I'm doing a master's in mindfulness in UCC at the moment, and that's helping me to really bring my meditation practice onto the next levels, which is I really, really, really love at this moment in time, you know, because it's coming at the right time, because myself and James have been completely flat out there these last 12 months, you know, and it's something that I need, and it'll also help us as well to go forward, you know, onto the next level, and maybe move into a different field, and so we can work around that area, you know, and that's our goal, is to move away from our full-time jobs and move into the podcast stuff full-time and be able to make a living for it and give and create more content and valuable content and help people that are coming up behind us with the same experiences growing up, you know, and that's our goal at the moment, is that, and it's happening, you know, it is happening, and we do have a belief in that, but I suppose when you're stretched out as we are at the moment, it can be very hard to see that too. But
Because they're juggling a lot at the moment, the two of you are. And you mentioned the word role models there, but the two of you are role models. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you don't get to the platform you have by not being role models, you know. You have thousands of people who look up to you and see the journey you are on and where you are now from where you were before. And of course, James, we'll jump into you now in a second, but like, to hear that story there is unbelievable. And even I can relate to the guilt and the shame, and I still have all that in me as well, you know what I mean? And the main times I got an urge to go back drinking and using it is when I start thinking of things that I've done in the past. I'm like, oh, fuck's sake. And I read a quote there the other day, and it was, people aren't addicted to drinking drugs, they're addicted to escaping reality. And that set with me really hard, like, because when I get an urge to drink, I think in my head, right, what am I going through now that's making me feel like this? And it usually is at the main thinking of guilt and shame and stuff like that, you know what I mean? And it's tough to deal with, and we're all learning every day, you know? But I think with the likes of yourself speaking about it, boys, it does help, you know what I mean? That story there alone is helping me. You know what I mean? So imagine how many thousands of people is listening to that and going, fuck me, man, look what they're at the main time, look where they are now. You know what I mean?
And
So,
you mentioned respect there. That's the best. I only said this to Timmy today or yesterday. It's like, you know, when we meet people that we don't know, but they feel like they know us because of the podcast, there's a respect there, and people respect us for what we're doing. And when I was in addiction, I had no respect, you know, because when, like, I'll go into my story a little bit, but the nuts and bolts for any, I became a heroin addict in the end. And heroin addicts is a very stigmatised kind of drug. I remember back in the day, I was often back at the gaff. Just a funny story, like, but,
I knew this one was going to come up.
but you know, if the odd day I'd spruce myself up if I had an extra few quid in the pocket, you know, get dolled up, go to the pub, end up back at the gaff. Sometimes Timmy's there, sometimes he isn't. But the boys could be snorting a mountain of coke off the table, lecturing me on drug use.
Yeah.
Because my drug was brown and their drug was white. But the point I'm making is, do you know, when you use heroin, you're the bottom of the barrel.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Definitely, yeah.
And you feel every bit of that.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're in that space, you feel the shame, guilt, you feel dirty, you're no good, you're not worthy of respect, you know? So the best thing about what we're doing now is that people respect us. And I think that's a great place to be, because more than riches or fame or anything like that, you just want to be respected for who you are. You know, but I suppose I'm actually originally from Dublin, I was born in the Coombe Hospital.
He's one of us, this
Yeah,
fella. Look,
I was born in the Coombe in 1985 on Halloween night, which is coming up. And my dad is from Inchicore, so I would have been raised a St. Pat's fan.
Yeah.
And you know, and a Dubs fan in the GA, and I managed the time in Richmond Park. I was the mascot for Pats and everything, or in Hill 16 shouting for the Dubs in my Cork accent, but I felt a bit stupid around 15, 16, saying, "Go on, Dublin!" if they're playing Cork, you know. So I kind of, you know, I'd be more of a Cork City and Cork GA fan now, but it was always like my Dublin roots was always very much present in my childhood, you know, and the Dublin culture and that was always a big part of the household, and I spent a lot of time in Dublin as well, so I was always at a close connection to Dublin. But when my mum is from Cork City, the north side, a place called Corona, and but in the 1985 when I was born, I have a brother 5 years older. My mum would have been 22 with 2 kids, and my dad left for England in 1986. You know, Dublin, Ireland was a mess in the mid-80s recession. A lot of men left to go working in England, and my dad was one of them. But my mum then, we lived in a place called Neilstown, over in Clondalkin. I don't remember now, I was only a baby, but it was rough enough back then. It's probably still rough enough. But Dublin also had a heroin epidemic at this time. So my mum is like, you know, she's probably isolated and lonely there, being a Cork young mother with two boys, no husband around. So she wanted to move somewhere quieter, so she moved to Knocknaheeny in 1986, which was probably the roughest estate in Munster at the time, you know. But you know, boys, when you're from an estate like that, it's only rough to people just outside it.
We say it all the time.
Yeah.
Literally, like, I do say that a lot of people, they'd be like, "Oh, I wouldn't go down to Halber Street or Shamrock Dermot Street," and I'd be like, "Why? Like, take a walk down there and you realise."
You know.
And they're like, they're walking around waiting for something to happen that never happens, and you're like, you don't realise how these places are stigmatised, but when you're in it,
it's all you know. Like when that's all you know.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I think from the outside it's completely different, but when you're in the midst of it, you're like, this is all we know, this is grand.
So we moved from Dublin to Cork in 1986 when I was only a few months old, into a place called Knocknaheeny, which is on the northwest of Cork City. So in Cork City, you have a city not as big as Dublin, and then on the outskirts, as the city grows, places get built onto it. So it'd be like like Tala, where you have like it built up here, but then you have a lot of countryside outside, and horses and quad bikes and stuff like that. That's kind of like where we grew up. So we're close to the city centre, but everything past our area then is fields and farms and stuff like that, you know. Blarney is only out the road. But it's you see, there used to be a lot of employment. It's a social housing area. The whole area is just social housing, which is great when everybody was working. But when there was a recession and most people weren't working, then that, like, unemployment and poverty breeds mental health and addiction, doesn't it? And when you have mental health and addiction, a huge amount of it in one small area, you're going to get social issues. And in Knocknaheeny, there's a big road that goes up the back of it. It's about a mile or so long, and it was just a straight road, and it was a big hotspot for joyriding. So Knocknaheeny got a big reputation for a joyriding area, even though a lot of the joyriding would be from fellas coming up to use the road. But Knocknaheeny, to be fair, no, there was a lot of joyriding in Knocknaheeny, you know. But that was where Knocknaheeny got the reputation. But the north side in general has a reputation for being a tough area, and to be in that area, there's like it's a stigmatized area as well, you know. Or you're from there, and it's like you know, if you're playing soccer or GA, and you went to another community for a match, under 10s or under 12s, they'd be calling you the K word, you know, that describes a traveller that I won't say, or they'd be calling you a junkie or a scumbag, and you're like, you're only 10 or 12, and this is from the parents on the sideline. It's like, do you remember Funderland, the Murrays?
yeah,
Right, so Funderland comes to Cork, we used to go to Mahon, which is on the south side, which is another rough area, but it's on the south side, and we'd share the number 2 bus. The number 2 bus would go from Knocknaheeny city centre, Mahon city centre. So when we're getting the bus to Funderland, we get the bus from Knocknaheeny to Mahon. All we want to do now is go on the waltzers, and we go around and Mahon, because you're from Knocknaheeny, they expect you to be violent and tough. All we wanted to do was the bumpers and the waltzers, and they're waiting for you with bars and hurleys and everything, because they think you're coming down to wreck their gaff, but you're not. But it's just the reputation goes before you because of the stigma of the area and the stereotype, you know. Like, I don't know if you're ever in a situation where somebody asks where you're from, then you tell them, and then they're like, oh, as if like you're going to
Every-
pull out a
still-
machete.
Hey.
Still today in
Yeah.
2022 that happens.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it?
It's madness.
Yeah, but
Like you even say, oh, the North Inner City, they go, oh, Jesus. You go,
I know. You're just like you're gonna pull out a handgun or something any minute, you know. But that's where you grow up, and like when you're a child, you're innocent enough. But you know, I suppose at home for me then, my dad came to Cork. He was a bouncer. He got involved in crime. Then there was a lot of issues in the home then with him and my mum, and the guards. And he went to prison then when I was about 12. And I found that very difficult, you know, having my dad in prison. I was always very close to him, you know, and you know, I looked up to my dad. Like you ran about role models earlier on. You know, if your dad is a mechanic, there's a good chance you'll probably want to be a mechanic. But where we're from, if your dad is doing a certain event or a certain thing that other people might look down their nose on, but to you, your dad is the biggest, strongest, best man in the world.
Yeah.
And you idolise him. And that's the way it was with me. And he just happened to be involved in this illicit drug trade, you know. So, and growing up as well, Timmy's a few years older than me. I would have looked up to Timmy as well. And Timmy was involved in drugs. And I'd have looked up to the older people that had the Air Max and the 501s or the nice car or the nice women. And I was like, that was what I wanted. I didn't want to work on a building site breaking me bollocks. I wanted to do what they were doing, you know. So, but when my dad went to prison, then I was always bright in school. So English, history, geography, the academic stuff was always kind of came to me without much effort. And was good in sports, loved soccer. So all I wanted to do, Roy Keane was like my idol, you know. Still is. Although if I met him, I have to try and play it down a little bit because he's real cool. But my dad went to prison. I was 12. I was going into secondary school. I got into a lot of shit in secondary school. It was a Christian Brother school. It was quite strict. There was no soccer allowed. It was strictly GAA, you know, one of them old school schools. And I've no good memories of that school. You know, we ran about the education piece there earlier on. Like, I was bright, but for whatever reason, well, for the reasons I know now, because I had a parent in prison, my mum wasn't able to handle me. You know, we were poor as well because we didn't have the money that used to be in the house, you know. And my brother was older, he moved out, I kind of got lost, you know. And so I wasn't able to sit in school or retain the information, or I was just badly behaved in school. But there was none of the teachers ever ask you what's going on or why. Why James is obviously bright, why didn't he get involved? There was never any of that. It was like, you're a thug, you're a skirt, get outside the class, you're suspended, and all these things, you know. So I did not like school. But the gas one then, you know, years later, last year, the school is a famous school now. And they were 120 years old last year. And they did up on Twitter, you know, hashtag 120 anniversary, notable students. There was John Creedon, there was Patrick Horgan, a famous hurler. There was Terence McSweeney, you know, an Irish patriot. There was Neil Tobin, a very famous actor, Jonathan Rhys-Meyers, actor, and then James Leonard. So they were like celebrating me, you know. And I was like, if they give me half as much fucking energy, you know, when I was in the school, I wouldn't have fucking having the story I have, possibly, you know. Because Timmy said it, you know, schools are an important place for the development of the child. And if a child is falling through the cracks there, you're setting the chains of motion for what came on down the line. So what I know now through psychology in school and stuff like that is the core conditions for addiction were there long before I picked up.
Yeah.
So when I picked up, I was always going to end up in addiction because of all the adverse childhood experiences or trauma that we speak about, you know. They were all there. So when I picked up that self-esteem, the anger, the hurt and all this stuff I had, when I took a drink or sniffed the petrol or the gas or whatever, I felt great. And it's like, you know, it's very normal for a teenager to experiment with substances. Nearly everybody will do it. Whether you're from Foxrock or Ballymun, all teenagers will have a smoke of a joint or have a swig of a bottle of bud. It's normal. But when you're from the areas like we're from or the backgrounds we're from, you're more likely to use it problematically. So like if you're from a stable family that have lots of resources and you're not worried about, you know, being poor or mental health issues in the home and stuff like that, when you experiment with that bottle of bud or that joint, you'll move out of that phase fairly quickly, move on with your life.
You can put it away, like.
Yeah, but when you're using that substance to give you what you don't have, like confidence, self-esteem, emotional hurt, and the next the bottle of bud makes all that fine, then it's like, right, now I need that because I feel shit without it. whereas the other child, they don't feel shit because they're from, a bit of stability. So when I started experimenting with drugs, it was addiction straight away. It was always very problematic drug use. It was like, if you're going out drinking with your friends and you get a 2 litre each, it'd be like a 2 litre and a naggin, It was like always taking it to the extreme. It was always like, get drunk and have a laugh, but it was get drunk and pass out, black out. And it was always black out, pure addiction. And around 17, I finished school. 17, 18 started going to prison then for antisocial behaviour, joyride, public order. We started taking a lot of tablets like Timmy spoke about there. I was in prison now down through the years with a lot of dubs, and Zimmos was the big thing for the dubs. Yeah. Zimovane this, Zimovane that. But in Cork, it wasn't so much Zimovane. It was like a Valium, Xanax, Rohypnol, Halcyon, these lots of tablets, But when you give a volatile group of young fellas, and in our area, there was loads of people like me and Timmy, and we all congregated together. And we was all drinking, was a big part of the story. But if you have a 17, 18-year-old full of testosterone and heart, and you give them an egg and a porno and 10 Xanax, there's going to be mutiny. And waking up in a guard station, not remembering how you got there, was, blacking out and doing stupid stuff, So that started the cycle of prison. But there's a part of me then thinking that prison was cool, because Timmy was up there, my dad used to be up there, and some of my friends' brothers are in there, and it was like a rites of passage for people in our estate.
Yeah.
And it's like, I went in for a fine for I got caught with an odd hash at a UB40 gig. I didn't pay the fine, I got 5 days in default. I went in, I did 3 days, and I came out with stories like a fella that did 30 years. Do you know the way you're 18? It's like, I seen this fella, boy, he was in there, boy, he got slashed this way, and he got, bravado and ego. When you're young and you think that is cool. But I didn't realise what was ahead of us, And the drugs got worse and worse. And unlike Dublin, Cork didn't really have a heroin problem. In fact, it was non-existent. And if you look at the Health Research Board's website, which is a great resource for people that are interested in this stuff, for the number of people accessing treatment in Cork for heroin use in 2003, 2004 was only 1 or 2, I think. Because it wasn't a big thing in Cork, it wasn't. But what happened around that time was Spike Island was a prison that used to be in Cork. That closed in 2004. And a lot of the young fellas between the ages of 16 and 24 that used to go there started going to Wheatfield, St. Patrick's, Mountjoy, where heroin would be a thing. And I think for the first time, a lot of those young fellas were being exposed to heroin use, and they're picking up the connections as well.
Yeah.
And back in the day as well, Cork Prison was a very clean prison, in inverted commas for people that are listening. It was a relatively drug-free environment, because there was no physical contact visits. And so a lot of the dubs used to come from Mountjoy, Wheatfield, to Cork to dry out and get off the drugs. And I met a lot of dubs, they're down and they're clean, and that's the word I use today. And I know some people don't like that word, but they're clean, or they're drug free, they're healthy, they're going to the gym. Cork was one of the only gyms, prisons with free weights in the gyms, So it was an attractive place for people that was trying to dry out. But I think the heroin came into Cork, I think, through those connections with the prisons and the criminal justice system as well. And then around that time as well, a couple of years down the line we had a recession as well, 2007, 2008, and that's then where heroin starts becoming a big thing, and nearly in all any heroin epidemic, if you look at Dublin in the 80s, Edinburgh, Liverpool, Europe, there was a huge recession in the 80s, and heroin comes in, and it's a natural painkiller from opium. And like, what better way to kill your time of joblessness, hopelessness and worthlessness than taking heroin? And it was very easy for me to make the progression from benzodiazepines onto heroin, because Timmy used to take stimulants, to kind of get him going. I used to take heroin tablets just to kind of numb me, and I didn't feel anything. And I remember, you ever see somebody to take a lot of tablets is just, just completely gone, zombified, you know what I mean? There wasn't so much alcohol then when the heroin came in, and we were smoking it.
How old were you when you first tried heroin?
21.
21, yeah.
Around 2005. 2005. And smoking it for a while. And I thought that smoking heroin was like a safer, more non-addictive way.
We hear this all the time.
Yeah.
Like, if you're not injecting it, you're all right.
Yeah. And my idea of heroin was like dubs, you know, because this
Needles.
HIV,
Yeah.
homelessness, and there I was smoking on tinfoil in a cosy gaff, feeling lovely. I said, this is fucking grand, you know. But eventually, I suppose we had it for a while, and then we didn't have it, and when we didn't have it, I was sick. Now it was like a cold or a bad flu, and I just thought it was a cold or a bad flu. 2 or 3 days. So then your man got it again, the fella that we used to get it off, and 2 lines off the tinfoil, the sickness completely gone. I knew then that wasn't the flu. That was sickness from gear.
I don't think, sorry, John, just going to
Yeah.
rush. I don't think a lot of people realise that your body actually becomes dependent on this.
Yeah.
So, like, heroin addicts actually need heroin to survive.
Yeah.
And coming off it, going cold turkey can actually kill. Your body will actually shut down. So I don't think a lot of people realise that. And they'll be like, you're on heroin, it's your own fault. But it's like, no, they actually need to be on heroin now. That's how it operates with your system.
Started off as a bit of fun and a bit of numbness, and now it's your body literally
And that's
can't
where
shut
the
down.
expression, you often hear someone say, I'm dying sick. That's because they haven't had it in a day or two. And it really does have that adverse effect on your body. That's why I think it really does need to be considered a health issue, because there is. It's not a criminal issue. It's a health issue. Your body is dependent on this. You know?
Do you know, and you'll be so sick that it's like you will do anything not to be sick. And if that means robbing from your mum, which I did, or ripping people off that you know, your friends or associates, I did that too. You know, you will do whatever it is. The blinkers are on, right? Like a horse. The blinkers are on, and all you see is at the end is the prize to get the drug. And all the rest of it is collateral damage along the way. You know, and then when you get the drug and you consume the drug, the blinkers come off, and then you're looking at the devastation you're causing. And then that guilt drives like more drugs and more drugs. And for me, I suppose going into prison, then it was like possession of drugs, theft, and all stuff related to heroin, really, you know. And so eventually I moved on to using needles, which was always going to happen. And if people hear us smoking, listening to this, are smoking heroin, they think they'll never touch a needle. You will touch a needle.
Definitely.
It's
Do you remember how and why you first used the needle?
I know how because at the time there was a drought in Cork, and there was this type of heroin, but you couldn't smoke it. So like,
So it had to be injected.
it had to be injected, and a friend of ours, who I won't name, for obvious reasons, but he did it for me. And I remember, you know, when you're smoking heroin, let's say if you have a 50 bag a year, and you put it up in the tin foil, and you run it up and down the tin foil, and it leaves little track marks, and after a while, the brown powder turns into like a black plastic beetle.
Yeah.
And it runs up and down the foil until it evaporates and you smoke it. It might take a half an hour to get through the 50 euros worth, but when you inject it, that 50 euros worth goes into your blood like that instantly. So it's like the high is way more intense. And it's like when you inject once, you don't want to smoke it again because it's a waste.
Yeah, you never care.
You never want to smoke it again. The only time I ever smoked after that is if I had a load of it, which was very rare.
Yeah.
And I was at to come into a few quid, and I was able to inject and then have a few lines, you know, like leisure. Do you know what I mean? More of like the ritual around it. You know what I mean? But it was more. But then what happens then is, and anybody that used heroin will tell you, it gets to a stage where you're only using that to be sick. You don't really get stoned from it anymore. But then you want to get stoned, so you need a little bit more. But it's a fine line then between getting stoned and overdosing.
Yeah.
And overdose started coming into my life then. And I was very lucky. I was found a few times. One time, there's 2 overdoses stand out. One was I was up in this bed sit. You might have places in Dublin like this, but in Cork, Lower Glanmire Road, Wellington Road is a real kind of a bed sit hotspot where there's lots of drug use, cheap apartments. And I was in a flat there on my own. I remember I got up, I went over and collected my scratch 9 a.m, went scored 9:30 back in the gaff at 10 a.m, and I injected 2 Qs into my arm, and I woke up, it was 10 o'clock that night, pitch black, I was disoriented, I couldn't keep my eyes open, and I remember thinking like, I'm very lucky I woke up there, because I know a lot of people that didn't wake up, like that's an overdose. You're not supposed to be out for 12 hours unconscious, you know. Your breathing goes so shallow that eventually you won't get enough oxygen and you'll die. But we say in Cork, if you're lucky, I was haunted. I was haunted that I actually came around. And I remember thinking, I knew, like, but it got to the stage as well where, like Timmy said, I felt so shit about myself. I used to go into the chemist, right? And in the chemist, now the chemist, be discreet about this, but you're getting needles off the chemist. You just have to give him your initials and your date of birth, and they give you needles, you know. But you're trying to stuff them, and you're getting your methadone. You're trying to stuff them down your top or down your jacket, you know. And people are seeing you, and you feel like shit coming out, you know. And you feel ashamed, and you feel dirty, and then all you want to do is go into some corner of the news and you know, and you're just lying there, then you don't give a shit what, you know, until you come around and you need more. And I didn't really care if I lived there because I didn't feel I was worthy of anything else. And the last overdose I had was in Cork City again, and again I was found by somebody. It was in the street, and I was piss drunk, langers as we say in Cork. I was langers drunk, and anytime I was drinking, I used to get very reckless in my behaviour because I used to get emotional, and all that pain would be heightened with emotion. You know, when I was drunk, and I was like, "Fucking, I'm going to take it all." You know, and I took it all, injected, bang, over, found again, and 2 paramedics and 2 guards were there when I came around, because the paramedics have to come with the guards when they're responding to something like this. And I got up and I walked away. And then a couple of days later, I was walking down through Knocknaheeny, where I'm from, and the guards pulled up next to me, and instead of searching me and asking me, you know, the usual questions, they didn't. They just were asking, like, if I remembered a couple of nights ago, and that I need to mind myself, that they know me a long time and they'd never seen me so bad, and I was lucky that somebody phoned me and raised the alarm, and all this concern and compassion that I never got that from my guard, because where we're from, the guard wasn't somebody that you would like they had to help you. They're like an occupying force, and if they drive into the estate, it's like you're on alert until log on. Do you know what I mean? It's like if there's something happened in the estate, you don't ring the guards. We sort it out amongst ourselves. You know, that was the attitude we're socialised with. But here was this guard breaking that for me. A bit of humanity. That's all it was. And I remember coming away thinking, fucking hell, if the guards and all here to show me concern, I must be fucked altogether. And but I had a small bit of belief in Timmy. Said it there. The stuff that he was doing, it didn't sit with him. He knew that there was a better person there, and I felt like that. I felt like that I had a bit of nature in me. I felt like I was a good person. I felt that deep down, and I felt like I tried to get treatment a few times. You know, I tried to, for whatever reason it didn't work, or did it for the wrong reasons, or I wasn't ready. But I was still alive. And I went again after them guards called me. I rang Merchants Ireland, which are a Dublin charity. There's a treatment centre in Cork, but it was too short for me. 28 days, I knew 28 days wasn't even going to get me off.
Again, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't have even gotten me off the methadone.
Yeah.
I needed months to be taken out of here. So I rang Merchants Ireland because I knew they're the big charity in Dublin. And eventually they got me into a detox in St. Francis Farm in County Carlow. I was in detox for 8 weeks. I went to the treatment centre, which is on the same facility, for 16 weeks. And when I got out then, I went into a house belonging to the Cork Simon community. It was an aftercare house for people in early recovery like me. And there was 4 of us living under one roof. Grand, I had a key worker. I started working on a C scheme cleaning office in Cork. First job in a very long time. I was going to the gym every day, going to NA meetings, you know, doing service, you know, going to coffee shops and all these great things, you know, a bit of freedom. And for the first time in my life, I was actually happy, and I wasn't trying to get tablets or drinking. And I thought that was impossible. Honestly, no, like, I thought like that my life was over without alcohol and drugs. I thought that was it. But here I was actually having fun and enjoying myself, and all the things the tablets gave me. I don't know if you've ever taken Xanax or Daza. You don't have to answer that, but what it gives you is confidence, and any worries that you have or insecurities, you don't care about them anymore. But what recovery started to give me was confidence, and I wasn't worried, or a self-acceptance. You don't have to try to be the tough man. I was never the tough man, or the prison and that masculinity thing we talk about. Like, that never sat with me, do you know what I mean? But here it was a bit of self-acceptance, you know? Yeah, it's cool to read books, it's cool, you know, to be smart, and, you know, all the things that you should be. I remember before they were recruiting people in Cork prison, in the school, to do the junior cert, and I was the only one in there that had the leaving cert done, and I was actually embarrassed to be educated. And that's the mentality I had. Yeah. But here I was valuing my fucking opportunity I had here. And then I started getting sick of the C scheme after about a year, and I wanted to earn money. I wanted to be independent. I was on the dole forever, and I started going out with Gillian, my wife now, and Gillian is in recovery too, and she's got similar stories to myself and Timmy, you know, prison and recovery and stuff like that. And she was the first person really that showed me university was there for me. And long story short, we spoke earlier on, I didn't think I'd be able for university, so I did a level 3 course, basic computers, then I did a level 5 in addiction, or in psychology and social studies, which was 1 year, And then I got more confident and I started learning about psychology and sociology. I began to join the dots then about my community, my country, my family. And I began to think like, we're up there and we're made to believe that we're scumbags and poor and would we ever get off our asses. But I'm starting to learn now that there's a whole lot of stuff at play here that's perpetuating this. And I got to start to getting a critical eye on issues affecting me. And it helped me understand myself, you know. And then different psychological theories, you know. I began to learn in I did a bachelor's degree then in UCC, in youth community work. I started working in the Simon community then where you know. And I remember one of the first days in the job, I was walking on the landing, opening the door for somebody. And this guy was walking towards me who I knew I would have used with him in prison and stuff like that. And he comes down to me and says, for fuck's sake, James, I heard you were doing well. And I was like, I'm working here. And it was like moments like that, just remember like, I'm not too fucking far removed from this at all, you know. And there go I, but for the grace of God. So the long and short of it then is, finished my masters in criminology, you know, I got a couple of awards in UCC publications and everything, which was great. I was on the Tommy Tiernan show January 2020, and out of that then, I got a huge amount of people contacting me looking for help and support and information and stuff like that. And I got a lot of media requests as well, and I declined every one of them. They wanted to do documentaries and all this, and I was overwhelmed, and I felt very exposed. And I was talking with Timmy. I was like, Timmy, I fucking feel for you, you know. I said, all these people looking for help and all these media requests want a piece of me. I was anonymous, you know, all of it overnight. It's like, you're on the paper, and Timmy was like, do you know what? He says, why don't we start our own podcast? Mind doing all their podcasts? We do our own. And podcasting was just becoming a big thing in Cork at the time, in Ireland, really.
Timmy fella with the big brain.
Yeah.
Straight away.
Yeah.
Dollars.
Yeah. Keep your story for our own. So that's then how the podcast started. And we thought, like, that we'd, and when he said this earlier on, and it really resonated with me, we thought that we'd be popular in our local area, went way bigger, but we started out as being a podcast around addiction, crime, recovery. But what we found very quickly was that it didn't matter where you were from. There was people all over struggling. And for us, it manifested in addiction, but for them, it's manifesting in domestic violence, eating disorders, compulsive behaviour. They're from different backgrounds, but we feel the same pain. And it just grew into a general social and health podcast in the end.
It doesn't even matter, like we said earlier on. It didn't matter who you have on. Like, you've probably had a lot of comedians on as well. We have comedians on all the time, and they come in here and we're all sobbing, we're in the hour. Yeah, like, it starts off funny, and then before you know it, actually, this person has a load of problems as well.
The first live show we did was outdoor in Cork City. Beautiful summer's day, we'd Willow White.
Oh, good luck to you.
The lad told us about.
Roaring, crying, roaring, laughing in an hour, you know?
But that's the thing.
Yeah.
The stuff that we talk about in these podcasts, they don't discriminate.
Yeah.
And that's why they apply to so many people. And you realise, you know what I mean? Doesn't matter, you can be crying in a Ferrari, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Doesn't really matter. These people, like, people go through hardship, they go through addiction, they go through domestic violence, they go through grief. You know, like, it's relatable across
like
the
what
board.
you're saying, a lot of people do feel alienated though, and they feel like, I'm suffering here and no one else knows how I feel, until people like us come onto this and we're like, actually, we're struggling with addiction, we're actually still struggling now with guilt and shame, and there's this going on, that going on, and then there's people listening going, actually, I'm fucking going through that, I'm not the only one, and boom, that's when it starts clicking, you're relatable now, and then word gets around, and like Calvin said, like, doesn't matter what class you're at, working class, middle class, upper class, you can still suffer with your mental health, you can still suffer with addiction, you can suffer with these things, you know what I mean? So these type of things happen to everybody, boys.
And we're lucky, actually, we're from working class areas, because it's not so much of a taboo, really, or a stigma. But you know, people in middle and upper class areas, they just hide it really well.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, like, if there's issues going on in our gaff, in our houses, you'll be out in the street screaming and running at each other. But at least you're venting it. But you know, in other areas, it's hidden.
Yeah.
And all that. Like, we had Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, two very well-respected people in the world of trauma and addiction. And what they were saying to us is that, you know, people that repress all that, it manifests itself in long-term autoimmune conditions like colitis and, you know, Crohn's and lupus.
Mental.
He said you have to express your anger and let it out, because when you repress it, there's a book, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah,
and
Brian Penny's always telling us about.
Yeah, so we the author of that on, and he was talking to us about, you know, like, even stuff that happened to you when you were a child that you can't remember. He said, but your body remembers it. He said, like, if for example, there was shots fired in through my gaff when he was a child, right? I don't remember it. My brother Keith remembers it, you know? But I can imagine my body remembers the fear that was in the house and the anxiety, because I grew up with a lot of fear and anxiety just in me. And it was always relief I got from alcohol and substances, you know? But I used to always feel afraid. And I can on any given day, but I have to check it, you know? And I have different coping skills now, but back then I didn't. I used what was available as my coping skill, which was a drug or an alcohol. But the best thing what recovery gave me is better coping skills, a heightened awareness, because when you're fucked from drugs and alcohol and you want a better life, you're forced to do personal development through residential treatment, 12 steps, counselling, psychotherapy, way more than the average person. But what we have now is, you know, we've got good lives, we're very busy.
You just have emotions again.
Yeah.
That's the fucking main thing, isn't it?
Gratitude
You don't
as
have
well.
emotions when you're using.
Gratitude to be removed from, listen, we come through Dublin City, I can see the addiction on the street, you know, and we're just very, very lucky to be away from it, lads, because there's nobody better than anybody else, you know. We just got a break, and at the end of the day, we took our opportunity. And if people are listening to this and they're struggling, you're alive, there's something keeping you alive, pick up the phone, ring Merchant's Key, ring Cool Mine, doesn't matter who you ring a friend, but it's there for you.
Yeah. Do you know, as I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you talking about the body stuff there. Do you know people that have drug addictions and alcoholism, right? We all know that they're constantly on the search for whatever the addiction is, to get money, to get more drugs, whatever. And what happens there is the mind is always on that, okay? Now look at other people in your lives that aren't addicts, okay, and they're stressed out of their fucking minds. Completely, okay? For completely silly things that don't even make sense. And they get sick. They get cancers. They get autoimmune.
Sure, you can get bleeding ulcers from stress.
Yeah, absolutely.
But listen to this. What drug addict do you know gets ulcers from stress or has cancer? I know. I never ever had nothing, because I never thought about any of this madness when I was on drinking drugs, because my thinking was always around drink and drugs, nothing else. So I was never stressed out of my mind about anything else. It was just about get drinking drugs and you'll be grand, you know. But there was other people then, just normal people going around their business, not addicts or anything like that, and they're stressed because of work, and they're stressed because of this, and stressed because of that, and they're getting sick, and they're getting very sick, you know. They're getting diabetes because they're not minding themselves, they're getting heart attacks, they're getting cancer, you know. That never happened to me. The only time that never happened to me is when I fucking probably fell or crashed or whatever. I never got any of these things.
It's like an advert for addiction, isn't it?
Yeah.
But you know what my point is? It saves people's lives as well. I always say this. If I didn't have alcohol and drugs in my life from a young age, I would have took my own life at a young age, because I struggled with sexuality as a young child. I didn't know. I was taught nothing about sex. You know, I had one parent, my mother. I was completely confused. I had no clue what sexuality was. But you know when it changed for me? When I had my first drink. When I had my first drink, I got the confidence to talk to a girl and I got a kiss. You know, and then I knew. But before that, I knew nothing. I knew absolutely nothing. I knew nothing about life. And I don't say that lightly. Like, I knew nothing. No one taught me nothing. Never.
It took you to go through that to realise this, though.
Even when I was 31 when I stopped, I still knew nothing. I still didn't know anything. I hadn't a clue. I never filled out an application form in my life. Ever. I didn't know what my PPS number was when I was 31. You know? I thought I was going to get a fucking heart attack, alright, when I tried to fill out the Susie grant for college. Because that was very stressful.
Yeah.
And have you ever heard of fight, flight, or freeze?
Yeah.
Okay.
Stress responses.
Yes. For me, it was the freeze. I'd fucking get stressed and then freeze blank. Anytime I came across anything that was stressful, a maths question, a word I didn't understand, and I lost the teacher, and I'm thinking about the word, and she's gone fucking a page forward, and I'm still thinking about the word. I'd get stretched next, all of a sudden I'd freeze and I'd go blank. Couldn't understand information, couldn't retain information, I'd just go blank. And that's how I dealt with things. I'd freeze. Cut everything off. Why? Because I taught my body to do that from a young age. Because of the stuff, the abuse that I suffered as a young child. I learned to cut off from humanity. I learned to cut off the emotions. I learned to cut off anything that was stressful, that was hurting me, or any sign of danger. Bang. You know? And that's what we human beings do it. Like animals process it. They deal with it and get on and go out their business whistling. We don't. We fucking live with it for the rest of our lives because we hold it within our bodies. And that brings us back to that book. The body keeps the score. The body retains the trapped emotion from situations in life, and it holds it. And what's a thought with an emotion? What's a thought without an emotion? Nothing. But what's a thought with an emotion? It stays there, like, and it brings up a past experience.
You know, Paul McCarthy, a friend of ours, I don't know, he gave us the example there. I think it was him anyhow. But he does kind of wellness workshops, you know, around the thinking. But I think he gave the example of, you know, an antelope is being chased by the lioness.
That was me.
Was it? That was you,
That was
right?
me.
That the antelope is being chased by the lioness, but this made a lot of sense to me. So the antelope is there grazing on the grass, right? The lioness comes up behind, antelope takes off. Nearly lost his life, but he got away. The antelope goes over there and he's eating the grass and he's after getting over it. But you know, for a human, we get away with them, we're up in our head about it for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
That cunt, that bastard, who the fuck do you think he is? And all that stress then is going, rather than just kind of accepting the situation, moving on with it, and then getting on with the rest of your day, we ruminate in our heads, and that has a huge impact on your overall health and well-being, you know?
And we care about what other people think of us.
Yeah, it's a social
So
issue though,
much,
that,
like.
and it's a problem with society we have. You know what I mean?
Look at society today, Calvin. You know, we're being told that you have to have your teeth look like this. Women have to have boobs like this, their lips like that, men, their muscles like this. You know, what's wrong with just being the way you are? Do you know what I mean? And we're pushing all this stuff onto our children.
Yeah.
You know, what are we doing? Like, we're not setting ourselves up for a future at all. Because if we keep going the way we're going, I know for a fact my 2 kids will throw me into a nursing home. The first sign of fucking
Forget
the
you
first
buy the milk.
the first sign of anything. Like, I'm gone, Dad, you're gone. Get over here. You know, you know. But
It's mad, lads, right? Because listening about your stories, right? Absolutely inspirational stuff. And then the fact that he's come around to doing the podcast and all, I see so many kind of similarities in a way. Like, you's come from, geographically, where you's come from in Cork, similar to where we come from in Dublin. How you started the podcast and what you want to do is why we started the podcast and what we want to do. Your goal for the podcast was similar to our goal for our podcast, you know what I mean? And then the themes around the episodes are similar to ours. We've even had a lot of guests on both as well.
yeah.
It's mad when you think about it, isn't it? Like,
Who started first?
they did.
June 2020, we started.
Bastards.
Yeah.
It's gonna say they
When
copied us,
did
but
you
so
start?
look, here we are.
November
We were November
2020.
But you
2020.
know what is important for us, boys? To not become competition.
Exactly,
100%.
James. And we say,
Because we need to be allies.
A hundred
There's not
James,
enough like
we
us.
say this all the time. There's no need for competition. Like, it's all well and good. People say healthy competition and this, that, and the other. Yeah, no need for that in the podcast game.
know
We're
when-
trying to inspire another generation to come up. There's no point in us saying there can only be one. It's only us. We're trying to inspire the next generation and each other, and they all grow together.
Do you know when there's only one, Hans?
Yeah.
When you're running in the Olympics and it's the 100-meter final, there can only be one then.
Yeah.
We're
That's what
living
I'm
in
saying.
yeah.
Is it
you know
not
what I mean?
embarrassing?
Oh,
Imagine me saying to you, yeah, well, we're better than you.
Yeah.
Wait, you're doing a podcast. You're sitting down and talking. What, you think you're better than someone else that's sitting down
do you
and
know
talking?
what? We're so different, lads, in so many different ways. Do you know, everybody's uniqueness is the way they're supposed to be.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, and when you start thinking that, or we start thinking that, whoever starts thinking that, oh, they're going to fucking take this from me, or get this, or get that, you're losing touch with yourself. Why? For this. This is why. Because every one of us have so much to offer people that listen to these in different ways. And that's what makes us so unique in our own way. Your comedy, your fucking very outgoing and chatty, and you're connected emotionally as well when you have the right guests on, and they need that bit of compassion and a bit of attention and care, you know. Whereas we can be witty at times, but a lot of the times we can be very serious.
Yeah.
Because of some of the subjects we talk about, and we need to be kind of there for whoever.
But I'd love
we're
to see.
talking
I'd
to.
love to see 2 women start up something, or 2 traveller fellas start up something, or 2 fellas from Ross and Limerick. Or there should be more stuff like what we're doing. Do you know what I mean?
100%, I agree. Me and Calvin talk about this so frequently, you wouldn't understand.
It's so easy to do, isn't it?
It's so simple to
Okay.
do, yeah, but it's. I feel like you can't fake being real. Do you get me?
Yeah.
You just start this up. You start her up with good intentions, like that. You're not starting her up to be the best. You're starting her up to, let's say, you help. Whether it's helping yourself, helping the guest, or helping your area. We started her up with
passionate about
changing the
something.
perception of our area, and that was our intention. Just because we dress like this and talk like this doesn't mean we're this. So we started her up with that intention. So with good intentions, putting a nice, good light on our area, and we thought it was only going to stay in our area.
Yeah.
So we had that, and I think that's all you need to do when you're starting a podcast. Start her off with good intentions, not to start her off and get the fame, get the money, be the
Because
best.
people will see through that.
Oh, quick though,
easily.
James. And this is what we can't comprehend is that we know people that are doing that, and we're like, everybody can see that.
Yeah.
And
We,
plus-
you can sense it.
We
Like,
get a lot of self-promotion from people looking
Yeah.
to come on as well. Who knows, no need to grow the Instagram and stuff like that.
exactly, James.
Another thing is, if you're in it for the money, we would have stopped a long time ago.
I know.
The
Listen,
retired
I
years.
get that fucking tattooed on me back these days now.
Now, what I always say about podcasts is it's because they're so easy to do, and there's so many podcasts out there, and because they're so easy to do, you get so much diversity, and you'll get something that applies to everybody. You know what I mean? There's a podcast out there for somebody, and if you can't find a podcast that applies to you, start your own podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
'Cause that's what you need. There's hundreds of thousands of podcasts around the world, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean?
And do something you enjoy for the love of it. And if success comes in numbers afterwards, then that's great. But we always said, we do it if only 2-3 people listen. If nobody listens, because we love doing it.
Exactly.
It helps me and Timmy. Do you
People
know what I mean?
say, ask us all the
Exact same.
time. We do it once a week, and people are always like, "Oh, is that not very strenuous?" So I say, "No, this is an outlet.
Yeah,
Why, this is a
absolutely.
hobby. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? This isn't a job; it's a hobby.
Absolutely.
Love doing the
Like
podcast.
an old therapy session.
Isn't it?
Basically,
Because,
yeah,
you know, it's very demanding as well to put something out
course it
weekly.
is.
You know,
Course
lads,
it is.
what people see and listen is the tip of the iceberg to what goes on into making
Exactly.
a podcast. And if you're only in it for the fame and the money, you won't last the pace. You have to be passionate about it. It has to mean something to you
But
more
it's the
than that.
whole thing of James, this competition thing. What we can ask better questions than yours. We can have a better there's no competition. You're sitting down talking about something you're passionate about. No one needs to be in competition with anybody, and especially in a podcast game. Let's all help each other, all grow together. What's that you always say about the ships?
Rising tide lifts all ships.
There we go.
Yeah, exactly.
That's all we need to do. Help each other and try and inspire a nation and different bleeding things.
Get this
and
Dublin
get people
Cork
over it.
collaboration off. On the road trip.
Yeah. Listen, you should come to Cork, boys, do a show or something.
I'd love to get
Yeah,
a Cork
we-
for a show, lads. Genuinely,
A
the
show
amount
would
of
I.
people that say to us, you just have to come to Cork.
Yeah,
I've
you
never
should.
been.
Yeah.
Never in Cork.
Never
No,
been.
neither was I, no.
Go out with that, boys.
Never
Yeah,
in Cork,
swear to
no.
God, never been to
Lads,
Cork.
we'd have to
lads.
fix that there maybe next
Yeah.
year or
Have
something.
you ever been to Kerry?
No.
Never.
Do you know what's funny? Timmy?
Seriously?
Anyone who comes to Ireland and they always say, "Where should I go?" I always say, "Go to Kerry."
Kerry's
Never been
unreal.
myself.
Kerry's the most beautiful part I've
Seriously?
ever
Is
been.
it that nice, yeah? Everyone says that to
That's
us.
beautiful.
Kerry's
It's beautiful.
stunning.
Yeah.
Like where Cork,
what I always
West
say.
Cork is stunning as well.
Yeah.
Is it though?
Beautiful. Oh,
Ah, it is, yeah.
No,
But Cork is
seriously,
a huge
beautiful.
area.
Yeah.
Like if you could go from some parts of West Cork, Beara, and if you go from Beara to Dublin, halfway you're still in Cork, like.
Yeah. It's the
Yeah.
biggest county in Ireland.
Oh, it is, yeah.
If you go from one corner of Cork, Castletownbere to the other, it'll take you nearly 3.5 hours.
It's mad, isn't
Yeah.
Would they?
Yeah.
Would,
3.5 hours?
Yeah.
it? It is the biggest county.
From down Bear, Castletownbere out as far as Mitchelstown, it'll take you about 3.5 hours.
That's nuts,
Mad,
boys.
isn't
What
it?
the
You'll be in
fuck?
Dublin faster, like.
Yeah, that's blade mad, isn't it?
Yeah, but listen, if you come to Cork, give us a shout. We get you on the
100%.
podcast.
100%, we'd love that,
great to
boys.
have you on. I'd say you've a big Cork following. Do you get like the analytics from?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
We know
Cork,
people
and they're
who
at the live
text us
shows and
directly.
all.
Yeah.
And you
text
know they're at
directly
the
on
live
Tom Cole.
shows because we ask, have you any cultures? And instead of just going, yeah, like the rest of them, they all go, "What Cork?" So you know straight away.
That's
you're
why
like,
I
"Oh,
always
there
say
they
to
are."
people from Cork, how do you know? Because the first thing they say is, "What's your name?" "Oh, I'm from Cork. My name is Timmy."
Oh, we're very proud of where we're from.
Yeah.
But lads, we know you need to catch a train.
What
Yeah.
time? Yeah.
It was an absolute pleasure to have you on. This is something that we wanted to do for a long time, and I'm glad it happened.
Yeah.
It's a very inspiring story from the
Yeah.
both of you, and it's definitely going to help thousands of people out there. There's no question about it. So
Before I close out, just what I want to touch on what you were mentioning, lads, is like you were talking about. You didn't know that you had these options of not just being an addict or a criminal, and I think that's what we need to kind of instill in people where we come from. It's like there is other ways out there of making money and making a living and
Yeah.
making a happy life for yourself. You know what I mean? College isn't for everybody, but it should still be an option for you. You should consider it. And even if you don't learn anything, Timmy, we were saying in the car on the way over, you learned more than the degree you got. You learned so much more about how to communicate more with people, and it's the networking side and it's the experiences that you live. Like I've learned more. I done computer science in college. I think I learned more about life than I did about computer science. You know what I mean?
And about yourself even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it
No.
teaches you can do this stuff.
Yeah.
You have this commitment in front of you, and you think, Jesus Christ, how am I going to do 4 years of this? And then when you're doing your last exam, you're like, them 4 years went like that.
Yeah.
And you know what I mean? And that stuff is invaluable. That piece of paper is worth a lot of money, but the stuff that you learned outside the lecture hall or the classroom is priceless. Like,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And you know what the other side of it is too? The years in college are they're years of your life where you could go anywhere. Like, you know, so it's good that you're inside in that environment as well, and you're learning, and you're also finding out what you can do and what you can't do. And that was one of the biggest things for me being in college. I actually started getting confidence in myself, stuff that I never had, because I was starting to exceed my limits, the limits that I
had told
had
myself, yeah.
inside myself, and I was exceeding them. And what happened? I started getting confident. You know, saying, "Do you know what? I actually can do it." And it started changing my belief systems, and that was a big deal for me. And if I never went to college, I would never,
never
have
got
got
down
that.
that route. That's the thing, lads. It's again, third level isn't the be all and end all.
Yeah.
But educate yourself, honestly, because that'll help you understand the world, help you understand how people operate. You know, even then when you switch on the news, you kind of understand what's happening. Then you can see why things are developing the way they are and processes and stuff.
But
Everything.
I think for podcasts for me and Timmy is like education has given us a vocabulary to communicate our experiences. So we're not just saying, "Oh, you had a shitty childhood." I can explain to you the parts of the childhood that were difficult and how that may have contributed to my outcomes later in life. I didn't have that vocabulary before I went to college. You know what I mean? I didn't understand how my past experiences may be connected to my present circumstances, you know, and having the words to be able to say like, I'm emotionally dysregulated, so I get stressed and then I want to use. It was like, I'm fucking pissed off, you know. That was or I'm angry, you know. But it's just to be able to understand your life and be able to put words on it helps us to communicate. So that's what I think college gave me as much as anything else.
Yeah, and we just need to tell people where we come from. It's all doom and gloom. Give them a bit of belief and a bit of hope.
Yeah.
And I think there's not more dangerous out there than a working class person with a bit of drive and a belief system.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Because they'll get to where they need to go.
Absolutely.
Right, we wrap this up. Lads, your podcast is available everywhere.
Yeah.
YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcast, the usual haunts.
And have you anything else to plug, boys?
Yeah. Well, when does this go out?
This will be out Thursday.
Yeah, we're flogging a men's wellness workshop. So there's a lot of stuff going on at the moment around men, and I know Jordan Peterson sold out in Dublin recently. There's a lot of that men are looking for a bit of direction, right, around masculinity. Some of the stuff we spoke about, you know, relationships, assertiveness, confidence, self-esteem, and we've touched on all those things down through the podcast. But this is an opportunity for people to come to myself and Timmy for 2 or 3 hours and, you know, ask us questions to figure out like what we're doing so we can help them in all these areas. It's only a nominal fee, €20. If you can't afford it, give us a shout. We might be able to sponsor you. But it's more about helping men. And so that's available on the website, twonorries.com, or you can contact us on social media if you want to have a question about that.
And it's just about maybe giving people a bit of structure in their lives. You know, some of the stuff that helped me, some of the stuff that helped James in his recovery, or helped me through my mental health, meditation, creating healthy routines with nutrition, you know, timeline, structure with my day, you know, all these different things that I didn't have before. It's just about helping men around those areas and maybe giving them an opportunity to open up a space where they can feel that it's okay to open up and be vulnerable, and they don't have to be that masculine kind of image anymore. Like men, it's time for men to start, you know,
Looking after themselves.
going deep within themselves. As
Be
well and
vulnerable,
saying,
isn't it,
this is who
boys?
I am, and it's okay.
Mm.
You know.
Brilliant, lads. Right,
Alright.
we'll wrap
Yeah.
this one up.
Thanks,
Yeah.
lads. Thanks for the invitation.
Well done, boys.
Thanks for coming on,
Take us
boys.
out there, Chris.
Boom.
Subscribe to this podcast for free on the Go Loud app.
What you waiting for? Put your back in it. Just a little more. Throw your weight in it now. Tell your body you're tight. Walk it hard and long. When you finish that,
The hip knocker.
go down, go down, go down.